When a teenaged boy drowns in Martha's Vineyard, middle grader Kaylani McKenna suspects it might be murder, and she's determined to uncover the truth. Ahead, a conversation with Tiffany Jackson about her middle grade novel, Blood in the Water. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Ahead, we'll explore the book and talk with the author about the inspirations behind it. Tiffany Jackson is a New York Times best-selling author of several novels for young adults, including White Smoke and The Weight of Blood, in addition to a picture book, Santa in the City. She joins us to talk about her debut middle-grade novel, Blood in the Water. Tiffany, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're a best-selling author of young adult books, so why did you decide to write a book for middle grade students?
Honestly, I've been writing a lot of YA, and I realized when I was going on tour and looking into the crowd, I would see a couple of 10, 11-year-olds holding my book, and I would kind of be like, oh, I don't want you to read that. And it really just sort of inspired my journey to start looking into books that were specifically for their age range, especially for kids who want thrillers, who want horror. So this was a perfect opportunity to do that with a great company as well.
So I have a question about the difference between writing for a YA audience and middle grade. As you pointed out, you thought maybe those YA novels were too advanced for those younger kids you saw. Mm-hmm. So what adjustments do you have to make when writing a middle grade novel?
Well, first, I would also say that, maturity in terms of reading is very subjective, right? Because, some kids in some places could easily read an adult book, and some kids, aren't ready for that type of subject matter. I was definitely a kid who, I grew up in Brooklyn. I definitely was reading adult novels at age 12. But I specifically broke it down to a very simple formula, is that young adult novels really deal with character learning about themselves within the world and how they work within the world, versus middle grade kids are learning about the world itself. They're learning about the gray areas. They're learning that not everyone is perfect, and not everything is so black and white, especially their parents. So I think that's the biggest difference between it, is just how they perceive it.
Well, in this book, your protagonist has lots of questions about what's happening in her real world. So tell us about the plot here. What are readers going to find?
So the book is about a girl named Kaylany, a broken girl named Kaylany, who, after her father's recent incarceration, has to spend a couple of weeks of her summer in Martha's Vineyard, which is this beautiful island off the coast of Massachusetts, known for being sort of a vacation haven for a Black elite. But when a popular boy is found dead at the beach, people don't know if it's a shark attack or a murderer on the loose. And Kaylany is determined to help her new friends find out the answer. But it may actually lead to answering some of her own questions as well, too.
So this is set in Martha's Vineyard. Why that location?
Well, I've always loved Martha's Vineyard. I've been going there since probably college, I believe. It's gorgeous. You go there and you immediately feel at ease. Like I was saying before, it was one of the first places that Black Americans can go, free slaves could go and buy land. And so there was just so much development there, and so much elite, and so much glorious, things to see. The houses are beautiful. The beaches are amazing. The food is awesome. The ice cream is great. And so every time I go there, I'm so at peace, and I feel like I'm in my own world. But then, of course, being a thriller author, I always say well, how can I make this place dangerous? How can I put a spin on this? Because it's not dangerous at all. And so, of course, I was trying to figure it out myself. And that's sort of how it kind of came to be. I really wanted to focus on a location that not many people have ever heard of as well.
Not to give away spoilers, but at the very beginning of the book, you kind of jump into the action. Kaylany's in the water. And among her many concerns is about whether she might attract a shark attack. And I think a lot of people might know, but Martha's Vineyard is where Jaws was filmed, so it seems natural that sharks might enter into the picture.
Absolutely. That's actually my favorite fact about Martha's Vineyard. Back now 50 years ago, Martha's Vineyard was turned into Amityville Island, the location for Jaws. So it was filmed 50 years ago, actually, literally this past June. So it's just, a happy anniversary to this film. But one of the things that people don't know is that, a lot of sharks do sort of like pass those particular islands or the East Coast. Like not many people think about like sharks like that. But it is a part of their migration pattern because they're following their food source, their main food source, which is usually seals, which sort of pass the island. And this isn't like a spoiler, but the particular murder takes place by an infamous bridge known as the Jaws Bridge in the book and also on the island. If you look it up on Google, it literally says Jaws Bridge because that's what everyone like knows it as. It's a bridge that particularly the sheriff had ran across following the shark. So that is that's my favorite sort of like factoids about this book and about Martha's Vineyard in general.
So you have personal experience with Martha's Vineyard, but what other research did this book pose for you?
Well, of course, yes, I've been there as a vacationer, but not as an author. And I think that was a big difference for me. Going there to research, because I did go just to do some research for my own, sake. And looking at the island as an author. So I'm looking at the very finite, the details basically. So I was looking at the type of grass that grows out of the beach or, how long it would take for a kid to ride his bicycle to different locations, where the libraries were. I've never been to libraries on the island before, so I was able to like go to the libraries and then do a ton more research than I typically would in terms of Black history. I did a heritage tour, so I was able to learn a lot about some of the great Renaissance greats that frequented the island and lived there as well too. So it was really fun kind of learning about the island from a different perspective than I'm typically used to going.
So Kaylani ends up here in Martha's Vineyard, and she feels out of place. Obviously she's not used to being there. Tell us a little bit more about her character and maybe why she feels that way. And then I have some other questions about her as well, because she's an interesting character.
Well, Kalani, like I mentioned before, like this Martha's Vineyard has been very much a haven for the Black community just since probably the late 1800s. And it's a lot of high Black society, a lot of, country clubs, links and Jack and Jill and those kind of so forth. And Kalani, who is not from that society, is the first time her really seeing Black people in this light. And she's a bit thrown off by it because not that she comes from destitute, poor, environment, but she's not used to the same sort of breadth of people. And it's really making her question, like, could she even be involved? Like, could she belong to this type of society? So she's very much a fish out of water, per se, when she's, with her roommates who go to private school, her housemates, I should say, or people with just like, exorbitant amount of wealth. She's just wondering and questioning her place in society, but also staying very true to herself. And I think a lot of people appreciate that confidence about her.
Well, that was going to be my next question is she seems to have the confidence and the curiosity to want to investigate what she thinks might be a murder, and the process gets her into some scary situations. So what is it about her that drives her to want to do this?
I think she's just a naturally curious person. She's also very dedicated and observant. She's the type of girl who goes into the room and checks like, okay, how many doors are there? How many windows? She notices things. She's incredibly observant. And that is something like that's very key at this particular age range, right? That we want kids to be more observant and kind of, know and foster that, learning their surroundings wherever they go. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to have quote unquote street smarts, but it does mean that you need to be, hyper aware of things. And she's very much that. And she uses that kind of superpower to sort of help her friends kind of figure out what's happening, which I love about her. I love incredibly confident kids. They're like my favorite brand of children of this age group, because they're really fostering that independence. They're really like kind of pushing towards that. And I'd love to see it. And I think that we as adults should be more mindful of it and more encouraging of it rather than sort of, dimming their light.
Well, there are a number of things you mentioned already that seem to be themes in this book. There's kind of the fish out of water thing. There's this strong female character who really asserts herself. What would you say are some of the other themes that this book explores?
I think the value of friendship also too, just remaining to be a kid as well. Also, not having your surroundings have defined you. A lot of people were at first judging Kaylani because, her father was in prison, and just assumed that she was also going to be somewhat this like person as well. And her father is the one who is her best friend. It was always encouraged her to go to Martha's Vineyard. Very well read, very well spoken, like all the things. And so it's very much a don't judge a book by its cover type of situation. So yeah, but the main message I'm hoping that, people take away from, particularly kids, is to remain and be a kid. Like, just be okay with being a kid. I think that's really hard in our society right now, especially with so much going on and the world feeling like it's on fire. A lot of kids are feeling kind of, do I have the right to be a kid, or should I be on the front lines of my parents? And I think there's nothing better than a kid just being a kid.
And from the beginning of the book, you state that because in a conversation between Kaylani and her father, she's worried about certain things. And he said, no, don't worry about those. Your job is to be a kid.
Yes, that's very important to him that, they would have these daily calls from prison, and they were only like 15 minutes. And so she's just like surrounding her whole life around these calls. And he's insistent upon her just continuing to be a kid. And even though, secretly she's planning on being like the youngest lawyer to help, exonerate him, he's still just very insistent upon like, I don't care what you do, just as long as you have fun. And I think that should be a message that all kids should really like absorb, is that, we love you so much, and we love how much you're dedicated to also changing the world as well. But we ultimately want you to have fun, because that's going to play a bigger part in your development than anything else.
You mentioned earlier that, it varies by child what material is appropriate for them. She gets into some scrapes. She's dealing with murder here, potentially. Do you see this as, again, like varies by child, but maybe for a little bit older in the middle grade? Or do you think any kid in the middle grade this would be an appropriate book for?
I think it is any kid in the middle grade spectrum to be into this. But of course, I think it's a great launching pad for the older middle grade to then step into YA. I think that's something that wasn't always missing from our industry, is that there's like this gap between too childish and too grown. And I was one of those kids who fell into that gap because I wanted books that, excited me. I wanted books that really challenged me, that, respected my intelligence as even though I was 12, I understood what was up. And so I think that's really one of the things that I'm hoping that more books like this come to be, is that giving the kids, particularly in this like gap that fall into it, like a cushion to fall on.
There's a question I like to ask authors of fiction.
Yeah.
And it's this: if you could spend a day in real life with one of the characters from your novel, who would it be and why?
Definitely Kaylani. And I say this like very like confidently, like honestly, I think that she's one of the coolest, cutest kids. And I appreciate kids that remind me of myself, in the sense of like just being, people would call them an old soul, but no, they're just like, they're just very aware of who they are. And I love kids who enjoy that about themselves. And so, yeah, I definitely want to hang out with Kaylani, especially in Martha's Vineyard. If nothing else, for the food.
Well, this was your first middle grade novel. Do you see more middle grade novels in your future?
I do have one that I'm working on that will hopefully be out next summer. That one is taking place in Savannah. So yeah, I now feel like I could. This was my first like foyer into the middle grade space, and I feel like I can catch it now. I was a little worried before, but I think I got it.
This middle grade novel is Blood in the Water by Tiffany D. Jackson. Tiffany, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you'd like to purchase Blood in the Water, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Well, thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.